Hello and welcome to People Making Money. I'm your host, Kevin Bemmel, and we are here every Wednesday morning. Well, Wednesday morning on the Pacific Coast where I live at 10 a.m. and 1 o'clock in the afternoon on the East Coast. And we talk about matters relating to professional success, building a business, building wealth, all of those financial oriented topics that give us the resources to live the kind of life that we want to live. So today's show, I'm going to be building on a show that aired back on. Let me give you the right date. I'm holding it here. I think right. Yeah, July 26th of 2000 of last year of 2023. It was a show on how you could quickly analyze an investment property. And that's just for one property that show talks about. And I'm going to do just a very quick review of what I covered there. But you can go to our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/@thewaytowwow, and you can take a look at that show. I do recommend that. It'll take you more in depth on doing an initial analysis of a piece of real estate, investment real estate anyway. But today I'm going to be talking about how you go from one property to a portfolio of properties using a concept known as leverage. So in its simplest form, leverage simply means using borrowed money to expand your ability to buy property. And so if you have, let's say, $100,000 to buy a property, you could either buy a property worth $100,000 and pay all cash, although people rarely do that with real estate, or you could borrow money. Maybe you'll borrow, say, $300,000. And that, along with your $100,000, gives you a total of $400,000, and you can buy a much larger property. So by borrowing money, you're using $100,000 to control a property worth 4 times that. And that's where the term leverage comes from. You're leveraging your investment. So now leverage can work in a number of ways. You can have what's called positive leverage, which is good. You can also have negative leverage, which may be okay, but having negative leverage is not going to allow you, in most cases, to continue to build your portfolio. So we're going to look at several issues related to this. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I've got notwithstanding my hearty dislike of Google Docs, for doing this kind of work, Google Docs is the most efficient, at least that I've been able to find. So as I mentioned back on July 26th of last year, I did a show on how you could analyze it was an 8-unit apartment building. At the time, anyway, it was on the market. The address was 2495 Corinth Avenue in Los Angeles. That's in the West LA area, not too far from where I live. And so I'm gonna scroll down so you can see all of the analysis. And basically you see there's 3 columns. There's the asset summary column, there's the performance summary column, and there's the income summary column. Okay, and I'm just going to move this up a little bit more. Okay, there we go. Yes. Okay. And well, it doesn't want to do that. Okay, here, let's do this. There you go. Okay. So in the asset summary column is the price for the property, what the loan amount is. In this case, there was an existing loan, and what the equity is, or the down payment would have to be to buy the building. Now, this is based on the asking price of the building, and you see we're gonna change that to reflect contemporary conditions. Okay. Now I'm going to jump over performance for a minute. I'm going to talk about income summary. So whenever you're analyzing a piece of income property or an investment property, we want to get down, generally speaking, to what's called the net operating income, or the NOI. And we do that by looking at how much rent the property generates, which, at the most rent the property could generate, minus losses for vacancy and collection. Okay, getting down to the adjusted gross income, which should approximate the income actually collected from operating the property. And then you subtract the operating expenses for the property, which generally come in 6 categories: property taxes and other taxes and licenses, insurance, management, maintenance, utilities, and replacement reserves. Okay. And again, I'm not going to go through the details on this. You can go look at watch the other show to find out where did all these numbers come from. Okay. But suffice it to say, you want to make them as realistic as possible, so that this number right here, the net operating income, okay, that's the income available to make loan payments. Okay. Now, you'll notice, by the way, that what's called the debt service, or the loan payments on this loan, are greater than the net operating income, and that results in a negative cash flow of $83,000. Okay, which means there's a negative return on equity. So now let's look at the performance summary. So with an apartment building, generally speaking, we look at several ways of determining, of comparing how this building performs to other buildings. One is called a gross rental multiplier. Generally speaking, that's done on the entire gross income. In this case, scheduled gross rents and scheduled gross income are the same thing. Sometimes you'll have other income, but you can have a gross income multiplier, a GIM or a GRM. Not a lot of difference between the two typically. Okay, so in this case, the gross rental multiplier is a little over 15. The price per unit is based on this price of $4.6 million is $575,000. Now, the price per weighted unit, which takes into account the fact that these are larger units, they're 2-bedroom, 2.5-bath units. Okay, so this price per weighted unit uses a 1-bedroom as sort of the standard. So a 2-bedroom is weighted at 1.25 units. So 8 times 1.25 is 12. Is 10. And that's how you get $460,000 per weighted unit. This allows you to better compare different buildings, because typically buildings have different sized units in them. So this gives you a better basis of comparison. And then price per square foot. So the building has 9,600 square feet. Okay, so that's where that number comes from. $4.6 million divided by 9,600 square feet, about $480 a square foot. Okay, now, even for so if you were dealing with another type of property, maybe it's a retail property, an office building, an industrial building. Okay, typically in those cases, you're going to be looking at what's called the cap rate, or that's short for capitalization rate. The capitalization rate is determined by taking the net operating income and dividing it by the price. So in this case, the cap rate is 3.8%. Okay, based on this, again, this is the asking price for the property. Okay, now these are the same. They're just copied here so that you have them close by. Okay, now in figuring out the loan payment, okay, you have what's called a loan constant. Now, the fact of the matter is, let's say you've got a loan with an interest rate of 7%. Okay, if you were to multiply the loan amount times 7%, that's only going to tell you what the interest portion of the payment is for that year. Most real estate loans, you pay principal and interest. So you need to know what the loan constant is, which is the payment rate that takes into account the fact that you're paying interest and principal. Okay. So in this case, the loan constant, I'm just going to look at this note real quickly. Okay. So there's an assumable Chase loan at 3.68%. That's a much better loan. Okay. And we're gonna look at that in just a minute. In fact, I want to check something real quickly here, see if we know what the size of that loan is, or what the remaining balance of that loan is. And it looks like we don't know. Land assessment. Nope, we don't. Okay, no problem. We're gonna kind of make something up just for the purpose, just for learning purposes. Okay, so and this is because this loan payment is so high. That's how we get into negative cash flow. So and this, by the way, is an example of negative leverage. So the cap rate of 3.8%, okay, is higher than the return on equity. The return on equity is negative 6%, which is an indication that although we invested almost $1.4 million, we're getting a negative return on that of a loss of $83,000 a year. Okay, so you hopefully you're saying, gosh, this doesn't look like a very good investment. I agree with you. Okay, so in today's market, okay, a cap rate of 3.8% is way too low. Keep in mind that the prime rate is 8.5% right now. Okay, so that doesn't mean that cap rates have to be higher than 8.5%. All I'm saying is that this property first came on the market when the prime rate was down around, I think, 3-4%, something like that. Okay, so the reality is the price of 4.6 million is much too high. So let's take a look at at lowering the price. So let's just lower the price for a minute to $4 million and see what happens. Okay, so you see that immediately raises the cap rate to 4.5%. Okay, and it drops the return on equity to a negative 3.5% instead of a negative 6%. So that's better. We're still losing $42,000 a year. Okay, but at least that's better than at a $4.6 million price. Okay, so let's lower it again to 3.5. Okay, so we're getting closer now. Notice that the cap rate now is about 5.4%, and we're almost at break even. Okay, so on a $1,050,000 investment, we're losing about $8,000 a year. Okay, so we have to go a little bit. Excuse me. We're still in negative leverage because because the return on equity, okay, is lower than the cap rate. So let's take it down another take the price down another $100,000. Oh, that's not quite far enough. So let's go down to $3.3 million. Okay, so we're still okay. So now at least we finally have a positive cash flow. Okay, but notice that the cap rate at 5.76%, okay, is still lower than the loan constant. Okay, so we're still in negative leverage because of that. Okay, so we're probably going to have to go down. Let's take a real dramatic price drop. Okay, so even at $2.8 million, you can see that the cap rate of 7% is below the loan constant of roughly 8%. So we would have to go down to, let's try 2,600,000. Okay, so at 2,600,000, nope, we're still too low. Let's try 2.5 million. Okay, there we go. So at $2.5 million price, okay, notice that the cap rate is 8%. The loan constant is roughly 8% as well. Okay, now we have a $60,000 a year cash flow, which gives us a return on equity, otherwise known as a cash on cash return of 8%. So all three of these are, for all intents and purposes, the same. This is what's called neutral leverage. So we're not getting a higher cash on cash return as a result of borrowing money. Okay, but we're also not getting a lower return on equity as a result of borrowing money. So our leverage is neutral. We're using leverage, okay, because we're still borrowing 70% of our price, okay, but we're not doing so in a way that enhances our return on equity. In other words, making it higher than our what's called our unleveraged return. The cap rate, the capitalization rate, represents an unleveraged return. In other words, if we paid $2.5 million in cash for this property, okay, we didn't borrow any money, so just stay here. Our net operating income of $200,000 represents our cash flow for the property because there's no debt service if we pay $2.5 million in cash. Okay, once we borrow and use leverage, so now we're using $750,000 in cash to control a property worth $2.5 million. Okay, and in doing so, we reduce our cash flow to $60,000. Okay, so we're using leverage, but the leverage is neutral because the cap rate of 8% is the same as the return on equity of 8%. Okay, so let's just drop this one more time. Oops. Oops, not 24 million. That's not going to do us any good. Okay, and here we finally get to a point where we have positive leverage, okay? So at a price of $2.4 million, our cap rate is 8.4%, okay? Our loan constant, which is 8%, is lower than the cap rate. This increases the return on equity to 9.3%. This is what we call positive leverage. So by using leverage and taking $720,000 in cash to control a property worth $2.4 million, okay, we end up getting a higher return on equity than our unleveraged return, our cap rate of 8.4%. This is the point we want to get to. We want to get to positive leverage. Okay, so for any real estate investments you have, you want to get to the point of positive leverage. Okay, now you may not be able to start there. Okay, you may need to start in negative leverage. Okay, so now I'm going to show you some different ways of working on your leverage. So are working toward positive leverage. So let's go back. 4.6 million is clearly too high. Let's go back to a situation where we're considering paying $4 million for the property. Okay, and you see we're in negative leverage now because our cap rate is lower than our loan constant, and we end up with a negative return on equity. Okay, so how could, over a period of time, we get to the point where, excuse me, we now have positive leverage? Well, one thing we could do is we could increase the rents. Okay, so let's just look at this real quickly for a minute. 304,200 divided by 12 divided by 8. Oops. Okay, so our average rent for these units is about $3,200 a month. Okay, these are let's see, there are 1,200 square foot units. There's 8 of them. Let's see, 8 times 12. 8 times 8,000, 16. Yeah, 1,200 square foot units. Okay, so so on that basis, there's this income that they're telling us the building could generate if all the units were occupied 100% of the time, works out to be, like I said, about $3,200. Okay, now let's just look at this in a different way. Let's look at this figure here on a per square foot basis. Okay, that's $2.64 per square foot. Okay, all right, hopefully you're following me so far. Now let's say that the rents went up to $3 a square foot. Okay, here, let me translate these. Here we go. That's what we want. Okay, so if that's the case, then each unit would rent for $3,600. Okay, because they're 1,200 square feet times $3 per square foot is $3,600. Okay, so 3,600. We have one unit. Each unit rents for 3,600. Okay, times 12 gives the annual rent times 8. Okay, that increases our rent to $345,600 a year. Okay, so if we were able to increase our rents by 36 cents per square foot, which is, let's see, 10%, 20, it's about a 15% increase. Okay, now let's see how this changes how the property performs. So 345,600. Okay, now notice what happened here. We went from a 3.5% negative return on equity to almost a break even just by being able to raise the rents by 36 cents per square foot. Okay, does that make sense? All right, so by increasing the income, okay, that improved the performance of the property. Okay, now can we raise rents 15%? Well, maybe not in 1 year, but probably over 2 years you could. I mean, it depends on the market that you're in. Okay, so let's go a step further. Let's say that we want to raise rents by 50 cents a square foot. That takes us to $3.14 per square foot. Okay, so this equals 1,200 times $3.14 per square foot. Okay, that takes the rents up to $3,768, which makes sense because 50 cents a square foot times 1,200 is a $600 a month increase. That takes our income now to $361,728. Okay, and notice now, first of all, we have positive cash flow. Now, we don't have positive leverage because our cap rate is still below our loan constant, but at least we're not losing money. So we now know that in order to get to just a little bit better than break even, we've got to be able to increase our rents by 50 cents divided by $2.64. Oops, I need to put an equal sign in there. There we go. Okay, in other words, we need to increase our rents by about 19. Nope, other way. By 19%. Okay, so if we were to be able to buy this building for $4 million, we need to increase the rents, like I said, by 19%, and then we'll get to a break even. Could we do that in 1 year? Probably not. Okay, but could we do it in 2 years, about a 10% increase each year? Maybe. It may be possible. Okay, depends where the market is at, depends how tight the market is for apartment rentals. There's a number of factors that could affect that. Now, of course, you would want to look at this carefully to see if you could, if this is achievable, is the word I'm looking for. All right. So one way to improve our leverage, even though we're still in negative leverage, one way to improve it is to be able to increase the income. Another would be to reduce the expenses. Okay, now that may be pretty difficult, but let's say that we're able, well, we're not going to decrease insurance. In fact, insurance is probably low. It's very, very tough. Property taxes kind of are what they are because in California, they just, it's a rate set by law. Okay. And by the way, this number here is fluctuating based on the price that we pay. So as the price has gone down, so has the property taxes. Okay. And by the way, the professional management for the property is also based on the income. So as that changes, that just kind of is what it is. Gardening, you were saying about $150 a month. That's probably about as low as it's going to go. Pest control of $600. That's probably about as low as that's going to go. Utilities. So there isn't a lot of opportunity for us to lower expenses. But in a building that you're looking at, there may be an opportunity to lower expenses. This is a newer property. And so, it's in pretty good shape, but you might, if a property has very high maintenance costs, then maybe by doing some renovations, although it's going to increase your capital investment, you may be able to significantly lower the cost of repairs and supplies, i.e. maintenance, and that would improve your leverage as well. So another thing to look at is lowering your expenses. So now let's just take a look at something here. Let's say that instead of having to pay the top property tax and special assessments rate of 1.25%, let's say that the property is assessed at 1.2%. Okay, so that lowers it by $2,000, and that improves things a little bit. Notice that our cash flow went up. Our return on equity went up to 0.9% from 0.8%. Let's lower this a little bit more. Let's lower it to 1.1%. Okay, now it's gone down from 50,000 to 44,000. Okay, our cash flow has increased to 15,000. Okay, by the way, look, our cap rate is almost 6% now. We still have negative leverage, but our return on equity is over 1%. So you can see how by lowering expenses, it increases the cap rate, okay, and it improves our leverage situation, even though it doesn't make it go positive, okay? So we've looked at changing the price. We've looked at increasing the income. We've looked at lowering the expenses, okay? Now, there's one other thing that we can do, and that is, remember, I said at the beginning, there's an existing loan on this property that's assumable. So just to make sure everybody understands what this means, so the original owner, or the current owner, I should say, took out a loan from Chase at a 3.68% interest rate, okay? That loan, if someone else buys the property, they can take over paying this loan. In other words, they don't have to pay it off and get a new loan. They can take over an existing loan. All right, so let's just say, for the sake of this analysis, that the loan amount on this Chase, the current balance on the Chase loan is $2.8 million. I don't know what it is, but let's just say, for the sake of discussion, it's $2.8 million. Okay. If the interest rate is 3.68%, the loan constant for this loan is probably, I'm doing a little bit of guesswork here, but it's probably somewhere in the neighborhood of, let's say, 4.5%. Okay. Now, look at how dramatically that changes things. Okay. So even though we're paying $4 million for this building, and we're getting it at a 6% cap rate, well, actually, let's go back now. Well, Yeah, no, I don't. I'm sorry, I don't want to do it. And we're anticipating we can increase the rents by 19%. That puts us in positive leverage. Okay, that puts us in positive leverage. Now, our cash flow is $113,000 on an investment of $1.2 million. So our return on equity is over 9%. This is fantastic positive leverage. And really one of the best parts about this opportunity, this building, is the fact that it has this very low interest rate assumable loan. Without it, as we were looking at before, the owner could not hope to get anything close to his asking price of $4.6 million. Okay, so, all right, so now we've figured out how to get the property into positive leverage. That's our first step in building a portfolio. Okay, now, again, we probably aren't going to get into positive leverage the first year that we acquire this building, but after a couple of years, now we're in positive leverage. Okay, so let's say that we go another 2 years and we're able to increase rents again, and this time we're able to increase rents to $3.50 per square foot. Let me just, okay, $3.50 per square foot. Okay, so that represents a 94 cents per square foot increase over the original rent. So that's a 36% increase over the original rents. Okay, and okay, now our rents per unit are $4,200 a month. Okay, and so now our scheduled gross rents are over $400,000 a year. Now, again, could we do this? Obviously, we're not going to do this in 1 year unless for some reason the rents were dramatically below market, which they're not in this case. Okay, maybe it takes us 4 years to get here. Okay, so that's about a 9% increase per year on average. All right, so let's plug in our higher rents. Okay, now look, we have a 7% cap rate based on our purchase price. Okay, we've got a return on equity of 12.5%. Okay, now let's say that let me just go back to what that was before. Okay, yeah, 6%. Okay, so let's say that a 6% cap rate is still the correct cap rate for this market. Okay, so what that means is we've increased the value of the building. So now our net operating income is $276,000 and change, and at a 6% cap rate, the building is now worth $4.6 million. Okay, and what that means is, this is not exactly correct because we would have paid off some of the principal here over 4 years, but just for the sake of this example, let's just say the loan amount is still 2.8 million. Okay, so now we've increased the equity we have in the property to oops, I'm sorry, I did the wrong one. Minus. Here we go. Okay, so we've increased the equity in the property to $1.8 million. In other words, we've gotten a 50% increase in our equity. Okay, while the value of the building has only gone up by 15%, the value of our equity has gone up by 50%. This is another advantage of leverage. Okay, so all of the increase by using $1.2 million to control a building that you bought for $4 million. Okay, all of the increase in value of the building comes to you as the holder of the equity. Okay, and so this is again one of the benefits of leverage is a small increase in the value of the building, 15%, becomes a much larger increase in your equity, 50%. Okay, so that's the next step in realizing what equity can do for, or what leverage can do for you. Okay, so now you've got $1.8 million of equity there. Okay, and let's see. I'm going to put it in another space here. And oh, I'm not going to be able to do that. Okay, well, shoot. This is my this is why working with Google Docs is sometimes a problem. Let me just see something here. No, vertically aligned. No, we don't want that. Insert. Oh, okay. Here we go. Okay, this is what we want to do. So, okay, there we go. Okay, so now we've got this. All right. So now that the value of the building has increased, okay, so let's say we go get a loan that's 70% of the new value. Okay, so that the new value is this times 70%. Okay, so now we can get a loan for about $3.2 million. Okay, because the value of the property has gone up. Okay, so we refinance the property. And what we do when we refinance is we pull out about $400,000 in cash. See, we're going to pay off a $2.8 million loan. And we're going to pay off we're going to get, in essence, we're going to get a check for $3.2 million. We're going to pay off a $2.8 million loan and keep the other $400,000. Okay, again, this is a benefit of leverage. Now, let's just say, for the sake of this example, we're able to get the loan at the same interest rate as the existing loan. Now, obviously, that can't happen right now. Interest rates are much higher. But let's say 4 years from now, interest rates have gone back down. Okay, so now the new debt service is going to be this new loan amount, okay, times the same loan constant. Okay, so the new debt service is $145,000. Okay, and let's look at our new cash flow. Okay, so our cash flow has gone from $150,000 down to $131,000. Still a very healthy, positive cash flow. Okay, we've pulled out $400,000. So our equity in the property is no longer $1.8 million. It's actually okay, our equity in the property is $1.4 million. So we weren't able to pull out the entire $600,000, right? We only pulled out $400,000. Okay, but our return on equity, our return on equity is still 9.5%. Okay, so look, this is still a great investment. It's still a great building. Okay, but now we've got $400,000 in cash, and we can go buy another building. Okay, now maybe we can't buy a building that's as expensive as this one. Nonetheless, what do we want? Here's what I want. Okay, nonetheless, we still have another $400,000 to go and invest. Maybe we buy a smaller building. So remember, this building we initially put in $1.2 million. Okay, so maybe we buy a building a third of the size. Or let's look now. Let's play around with some examples. Let's say instead of borrowing $3.2 million, we're able to borrow $3.4 million. Okay, so now we still have our original investment of $1.2 million in here. Okay. However, we now have 600,000. Oops. Okay, we now have $600,000 to invest. Okay, so this allows us to go and buy our next property, and we go do the whole thing over again. Okay, we may have to start out with a building that has negative leverage, but we increase the rents, okay, over the years, increase the income, hopefully eventually get into positive leverage, okay, and then we refinance it, pull some of that cash out, go buy another building. Okay, now let's look at an even more positive. Right now, we're basically saying you can only borrow 70%. Let's look at a situation, and actually, let's see what this percentage is. Okay, so this is a situation, in this case, we're saying we were able to borrow in this new loan 74%. Now that's possible, okay? It depends on the lending climate, so that's not outrageous. All right, let's look at another situation. Let's say the lending environment has improved a lot, and you're able now to borrow 80%. Okay, so we take $4.6 million times 80%. Okay, so now, oops. No. Just want to make sure. Yeah. Now we're borrowing almost $3.7 million. Okay, so assuming we're able to borrow 80% of the new value of the building. Okay, now, look what's happening here. Our debt service has gone up by $40,000 a year. Okay, well, we're still cash flowing $110,000 a year. Okay, but we've reduced our equity in the building to $900,000. Okay, what does that mean? That means that we now have $800,000. I want to make sure I'm doing this right. 3.6. Yeah, we have $800,000. 900,000. Yeah, we paid off. Yeah. Okay. We have $800,000 in which to make a new investment. Okay. Now that's not the 1.2 million we had before. Okay. But it's still a lot of money to go buy another building. Now, by the way, maybe you didn't come up with this whole $1.2 million yourself. Maybe you have a partner in this. Okay. And so maybe each one of you put up $600,000. Okay, so while you're working the real estate investment, maybe you're the managing partner of the partnership or the managing member of the LLC, right? And by all of your hard work, okay, you've been able to generate another $800,000 in capital to invest in another property. In the meantime, your partner's been working on his business. Maybe he's got another $400,000 that he can put into another building. And so he puts up 400,000. Oops, not 40,000. Okay. And now what have you got? Well, you've got you've got another $1.2 million to invest in another property. Okay. And now you can go out and buy another property, maybe similar to this one, do it all over again. Now you say, wow, that takes an awful lot of time. Yes, that's true. It can. Okay. You're not going to build a real estate portfolio overnight. Okay. You're not. Now, how can you speed up this process? Well, let's look at how we went from having negative leverage to positive leverage. One way is we were able to increase the income. So what smart investors often do is they look for properties where the income is significantly below the market rates. And they know going in that they're going, even if market in rates don't change, there's still such a big gap between what the tenants are paying now and what the market will bear now. So let's just take a case where the tenants are currently paying about $3,200 a month. But right now, if you look at similar apartments in the area, tenants are paying $4,200 a month. So you've got what's called upside in your rents of about $1,000 a unit, or 36%. So if you could find a building like that, where let's say over a year, you're able to bring the rents just up to market, you can do all of this in a 1-year period. Okay. And you can go from a negative leverage building to a positive leverage building in a year, instead of what we were talking about before, which is maybe having to wait 4 or 5 years in order to do this, because the original assumption was this $3,200 a month was market. Okay, now we're changing the assumption and we're saying no, 3,200 is below market by 36%, and so over the year we're going to work to bring the rents up to market. Okay. If we're able to do that, okay, now in Los Angeles, you can't because there's rent control. But in most places in the country, there isn't rent control. So you can raise rents up to market pretty quickly, assuming there's, enough demand. Okay, so then maybe you're able to get rents up to market in a year. You increase them this 36%, and now you're in a position to refinance the property, pull out your cash of $800,000. Okay, maybe you find a third partner to put up $400,000, and so for your next building, okay, now you still have another $1.2 million. Or maybe your current partner, you did such a great job on this one, so he's willing to put up another $400,000 of capital. Okay, and in that way you can do it much more quickly. Okay, another way of making this happen more quickly excuse me, is to buy a fixer-upper where the rents are low and the expenses are high because the property is not in great shape. Okay, so by buying the property again, let's say this is a fixer-upper now, okay, and we originally bought it was $3,200 a month, okay, and we paid $4 million for it. Let's say we've got to invest a couple of $100,000 to really get all the units fixed up, maybe put in some new appliances, paint them all, fix up the landscaping. But we put in that money and it so improves the look and the maintenance quality of the building that we're able to increase the rents more quickly. Hey, fantastic. And again, we can achieve these higher rent numbers much faster than just waiting for the market rents to increase over the years. Okay, so buying a fixer-upper is another opportunity. Now, there are risks, right? If you're buying a fixer-upper, can you be sure that a $200,000 additional investment will be enough to really fix up the property? What happens if we get a spike in inflation like we've had over the last couple of years, and now all of a sudden our cost to renovate has gone way up? Well, see, that's a risk. Okay. On the other hand, it may be a risk worth taking because although maybe you think, well, we'll renovate it and in a year we'll get the rents up. Okay, so maybe it'll take you 2 years, but 2 years is still better than 4 years, right? So it's still faster. So buying a fixer-upper can be another way of doing this. Now, I'm talking about doing this in a multi-residential building. If you look at smaller buildings, 1 to 4 units, you can do the same thing. Okay, it works all the same way. Okay, it's just that the numbers are probably going to be a little bit smaller. Okay, and likewise, you can look at larger buildings, 10, 12, 15, 20, 30, 40 unit buildings. Okay, and maybe the price per unit is much lower in a larger building, something like that. And again, and so then that's another way of looking at it, where if you're looking at a more moderately priced building, you may have more upside opportunity, but it is going to be more work because you're going to have more tenants. Okay, so those are all things to look at in terms of how you use leverage. So the main point that I hope you'll take away from this is, even if you decide to buy a building using negative leverage at first, you want to have a plan for how you're going to get to positive leverage. Okay, there's a famous saying about real estate investing that says you make money when you buy the building. You say, how can you make money when you buy the building? What that means is, at the time you buy the building, you have your plan set for how you're going to increase the rents, decrease the expenses, increase the value of the building in such a way that even if you didn't buy it at positive leverage, you're going to get to positive leverage, which will allow you to sell at a profit. Even here, notice you bought the building for $4 million. It's now worth $4.6 million. Even after costs of sale, you've got a profit of about $500,000. That's what we mean about making money at the time you buy the building. You may not realize that, well, you won't realize that profit until you sell it, of course, but you know how you're going to make money off it at the time you buy it, as opposed to just buying on speculation and saying, oh, I'm going to buy this building and hope that the rents are going to increase and I'll be able to raise the income or lower the expenses and make the building more valuable. That's speculative. That's not how smart investors handle things. They have a plan going in for how they're going to make money, okay? And it has to do with this concept of leverage, of getting to the point where their capitalization rate, okay, their unleveraged rate, as we pointed out before, is higher than the rate they're paying on their loan. So now their return on equity is higher than their cap rate, and they have positive leverage, okay? That allows them to increase the value of the building, refinance it, and pull out cash. And with that cash, they now have funds available to buy another building. That's how you use leverage in order to build your real estate portfolio. Okay, so you might not have followed all of that on, first time through. It can be a little bit complicated. I'd encourage you to, watch the show again. It'll be posting in just a few minutes after the show is over. And again, if you want to learn how to do that initial, the initial it's called a pro forma. It's an estimate of how the building will operate. I'll post the link to that previous show in the show notes, the one from July 26th of last year. Take a look at that, review this episode, and you're going to have pretty much all you need in terms of basic knowledge to start looking at properties and seeing if you can find something that will allow you to start building wealth through real estate. That's the name of the game. Okay. So if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in various social media chats or social media posts. I'll be happy to answer them. And if it's something, personal and individual, you can always email me. My email address will be in the show notes. And, just know that if it's not something in my area of expertise, I'll say so. And I'll, if you want me to refer you to someone who can help you, if it's a tax issue or something like that, I'm going to, refer you to an accountant or something. Or if it's a legal issue, I'll refer you to an attorney because I'm neither. Okay. But I do encourage you. This is how everyone who's made money in real estate, including me, for working with clients and such. This is how we've made money. Okay, that it's how it works. There's no magic to it. Okay, it's candidly, it's hard work. It's a lot of hunting, looking for a good investment. Okay, and it's a lot of hard work. Fixing up your building, finding, increasing your rents or finding new tenants, finding a good loan. Okay, you can see there you're going to need to work with lots of people. You need a good loan broker or a good source of real estate loans. You need good vendors who can help you keep your building in good repair and get it fixed up. You're going to probably want some partners, especially if you're going to buy a $4 million building. You may not be able to buy that with your own capital, first time out. You may need to start with something smaller or find a couple of partners to buy a building with together. All of that means working with good people that you feel are honest, reliable, okay, that will treat you, in a reasonable way, and not gouge you and in terms of your vendors, etc. Okay, so you can, and all of those things you can be creating those relationships even as you're looking for properties to invest in. Okay, it doesn't cost you anything to meet people, talk to them, ask them questions, find out what their abilities are and what their interests are. All of that you can be doing right now, even if you don't have the capital to buy a piece of property yet. And you can, while you're building up your capital, start creating your relationships. So that's our show for today. And this is also our last show for the week. So we will be back next week on Monday at 10 a.m. Pacific time with the next episode of Trusts and Estates Weekly. On Tuesday, the next episode of Business Lessons from the Military, 10 a.m. Oh, I just realized I'm scrolling the wrong thing here. 1 second. There you go. Now we got the right one. So on Tuesday of next week, the next episode of Business Lessons from the Military at 10 a.m. Pacific time. And then a week from today, 10 a.m. Wednesday Pacific time for the next episode of People Making Money. So thank you very much for joining me today. Wishing you a fantastic rest of the day and a wonderful rest of the week. And looking forward to seeing you again on the following week. All the best, and signing off as I always do. Marie, you are my belle. All the best, folks.